Welcome to the first,
Hello. Dash new line.
but hopefully not first annual,
Hello,
Dean's virtual reunion webinar. Usually during reunion, the Dean hosts a lunch open to engineering alumni who are on campus. So in a way, think of this maybe as the virtual equivalent of that lunch. My name is Chris Dawson, and I work in the College of Engineering's Communications Department. I have a couple of technical points and some introductions to cover very quickly, and then we'll turn things over to the Dean. The itinerary for today starts with a presentation by Lance Collins that should go roughly 30 minutes. Depending on the type of device you're using to access this webinar, a phone or a tablet or a laptop, your Zoom screen will give you two options somewhere for communicating with the hosts of the webinar. One is the chat function, and the other is the Q&A function. We're going to ask that you use the chat function if you have technical questions about the Zoom meeting and Zoom and how to use it. And the Q&A function will be where you submit questions that you would like to ask of the Dean or the Associate Deans. Okay, so the chat for technical questions and the Q&A is questions for the panel. Speaking of which, our panel today consists of Yang Zhu, Associate Dean of Masters of Engineering Programs, Jose Martinez, the Associate Dean for Diversity and Academic Affairs, Erin Mulrooney, Associate Dean for Administration, Miranda Swanson, Associate Dean for Student Services, Carol Packard, Associate Dean for Alumni Affairs and Development, Grace Jing, Associate Dean for Research, Graduate Studies, and Entrepreneurship, and Mike Thompson, Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs. And of course, serving in the 10th year of his remarkable tenure as Cornell's Joseph Silbert Dean of Engineering is today's main speaker, Dean Lance Collins. So take it away, Lance.
Thanks a lot, Chris. This is an unusual way to meet. I'm sorry that we're unable to meet in person, but nevertheless, I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know about the fabulous College of Engineering in my final weeks as Dean. So if you don't, Christy, why don't you go to the next slide? So we're really going to be reminiscing today, looking back on what is 10 years of sweat, toil, labor, and also love of a College of Engineering at Cornell that has been a spectacular part of my career. Yes, you can go to the next one. This is really just, I love this visual. This is just something, if you're able to download our alumni magazine, this was the visual that they put together in recognition of my 10 years. And they're just lovely pictures that are important. And I'll just let you and suggest that you go take a look at the article. It talks in greater detail about a lot of the things, but I'm going to go over some things over here. So let's just go to the next slide. So one of the most important things I do or did and continue to do is recruit. Recruiting faculty is exceptionally important. Faculty drive the whole engine of the college forward. And so we entitled this Persevering to Attract the Best Faculty in the World. Next. So it's remarkable because, this is not a number I'm paying attention to, but over that 10-year period, we hired 100 faculty, which is really remarkable. We're about a faculty of a little over 200. So, on the order of half of the faculty have turned over. Now that's in part because when I started, there was a lot of worry, in fact, at the time. And let's go back 10 years, 2010. It was just after the Great Recession, right? And so the other thing that was going on was that we were looking university-wide at our demographics, and university-wide we had a large contingent of the faculty approaching retirement, and so it was clear that there needed to be a turnover. And it's tricky to turn things over. It's not inexpensive to hire faculty. And so, in an economic downturn, it was difficult financially. and alumni really came to the rescue. The we were celebrating our sesquicentennial in the midst of that period of time, and we created something called Sesquicentennial Fellows, which was a way that really allowed us to jumpstart hiring. And it was wonderful because it was at a time the rest of the universities really weren't competing, and so we were just able to get some amazing people. Next slide. So there they are. And, you know, all I can say is this is a group of people that are, you know, second to none in terms of brilliance. They span the entire college, as you saw in the previous slide. There's people that are senior. You know, one of the things that I think I did a little bit more than some of my predecessors was not only hiring wonderfully talented junior faculty, but also focusing in strategic ways to do some hiring at the senior level. And that was, you know, because of the turnovers and so forth, where we needed it, we were able to succeed as far as that was concerned. So this is the future, right? This is here it sits, and you should rest assured, the future is in good hands. These are really brilliant people across the entire college, and I'm very proud to have been able to succeed. Next slide. So, you know, not surprisingly, we recruited them from the top schools, and this is just some examples of schools that we were able to attract the faculty from. The second bullet's also very important to me. As many of you know, diversity is really one of the important focal points of my term as dean. I often am talking, and I will be talking momentarily about our undergraduate students, but here just to show that we're not just looking at undergraduates, we're also looking at diversity at the graduate school level. I won't say as much about that, but we are doing it. I'll say a little bit. But also at faculty level. And I work closely with the Associate Dean for Diversity and Faculty and Academic Affairs, and we have succeeded. This is just showing you that relative to the national average, which is maybe about, I think it's maybe 15% or something on that order, we have really risen dramatically in the last 10 years, starting at 12%, rising to 22%. And, you know, a third basically of the new faculty that you just saw on the previous slide are women, which is really extraordinary. Next slide. And we weren't just focused there, it's also creating a fantastic student body. Those are the two things that you've got to get right when you're in my job. And we were also very successful at bringing brilliant students to Cornell. Next slide. So our application Soar and our yield Soar, and I'll say a little bit about both of those. So going back to when I started, we had a little under 8,500 applications, and a year ago, 13,000. So that gives you a sense that Cornell was very much in the minds of young, aspiring high school students that are thinking about, hey, where do I want to go for an engineering career? We were high on their list and an increasing position on their list. In some ways, I feel like I'm the most proud of the second bullet, which is that the yield. So yield is defined as the percentage of students accepted who matriculate, right? So those are the students that thought about it, and probably because of the quality of students that we're able to get, were admitted to, 4 or 5, 6 other places. You know, they've got lots of options. And the fact that we were, able to increase the percentage from 42% to 59% is really, really spectacular. And of course, I can't know about all of the decision-making that goes behind that. That's difficult to know completely. But I do think there are a couple of things that made a big difference. And the first thing I would say, I think our project teams have really made us stand out. People know that you can come to Cornell and do some spectacularly interesting projects that take what you learned in the classroom and allow you to use it in the world. And it's just something that students are very energized about. When I meet freshmen, they often talk about this as one of the reasons that they selected Cornell. The other is Cornell Tech. Now, it's interesting because Cornell Tech is graduate education, but it just raised the visibility of the university tremendously. It just made us, something, one of the schools that they talk about when they're in their high schools, and it just helped us to recruit an even larger fraction of the students. And I just mentioned the third one is just to show that Cornell is still no nonsense. It's everything. For those of you that are alumni of the college, you'll know what I mean when I say that. It's still the same, but but we also graduate 88% of the students. So it just, when you're bringing in brilliant students, they're going to be able to navigate it, and they do, which I'm very proud of. Next. Now, of course, you've heard me talk about this, and this is really, in some sense, an incredible bragging right for all of us, for our community collectively, that over my term as dean, which the percentage of women in the undergraduate program rose from 34% to gender neutral 50-50. And that to me was just a milestone that frankly I could not have imagined happening in my entire career, much less, I mean, it just felt like it was something that would be decades away. We all have the stories of when we were students and there were these, 2 or 3 brave ladies that were, in the class. And here we are talking about where it really is, it really means that in some sense, gender disappears from the landscape of thinking in the educational, in our educating our students, which is really remarkable. And just look at the national average is 23%. And I can also add that this is a topic there are a lot of meetings that bring the deans together, and a standing topic in those discussions is the very stubborn nature of this statistic, that it's 23%, but it's been that way probably for at least 5 years, maybe longer. It's been flat nationwide. Nationwide, it's been flat, and yet Cornell was able to grow its percentage to that point. So it really is a bragging right, and something that I'm proud of, and I hope that the whole community feels the same way. Next slide. How do we do it? And one of the things that stands out is what we call diversity programs in engineering, which is a platform of support for the students who historically had not been engineers, right? That engineering was a very male-dominated, for example, and so it was not as open. And so part of the way, one of the ingredients to succeeding is to have a support structure so that when women were coming to the college, that they would be integrated and feel like they were included and able to participate throughout all of the aspects. And so our DPE program really is a stellar program, a real standout. And really, I owe it all. Jamie Joyner's the lady third over from the left, who is the director and runs an incredible program. And just a few things, I added a few bullets here, so when I came in, the percentage of underrepresented minorities in the population was 10%. Today, 19%, almost a doubling, again, over just a 10-year period, which is remarkable. And even more remarkable, we're looking at our freshman class that will be coming in this fall, which has this uptick 25%, 6 points above where the college is. It's really a really big jump. How do we do it? We have Curie and Catalyst programs. Those are summer programs for our high school students to come in and get to know Cornell. We find that when we bring them to campus, then we're more successful in recruiting them to the university down the road. We have Ryan Scholars in our CUES programs. These are summer programs that help students from disadvantaged backgrounds to get sort of caught up and ready for prime time when their freshman year begins. LS SAMP is really looking at the other side of things to encourage students to think about graduate school and possibly going on to do a PhD, maybe joining academia down the road. We support our, and I mentioned, I'm not going to say a lot about the grad students, but we're also very interested in diversity at the graduate student level. We have 2 support programs. The Sloan Foundation has been supporting us for over a decade. We're a standout as far as they're concerned. They sing our praises. And the Coleman is an alumnus who supports. These are fellowships that are focused on diversity at the graduate level, at the PhD level, and we've been equally successful as far as that's concerned. And the final bullet, I just note that back in 2011, we received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring, which is actually it was given by President Obama in a Rose Garden ceremony that the prior director, Sarah Hernandez, was able to get from President Obama. So it's been quite a distinguished program. So you only succeed because you've got strength in staff that supports what you're trying to achieve. Next slide. Advancing an engineering education experience like no other. The way I like to think of this is we want to be creative and innovative in terms of who we teach and how we teach, right? That just keep it very, very simple. That because those things obviously interact in an important way. And so let me say a little bit about how we teach or what we teach in some sense. So next slide. So just so you know, Cornell is a place of fundamentals, rigorous education that's across all of our majors. All of our departments are in the top 10. We are just as rigorous as you remember. This is a no-nonsense place. I tell that even to high school students that ask me. I'm honest about it because it is the truth, right? And I'm not, I'm saying it because I don't want somebody to come thinking it's otherwise. I do think that we are much more supportive. Some of you have told me some stories of the past. We're not like that anymore, but we maintain that level of rigor because that's how you do great engineering. If you don't have those foundational understandings of things, then it's very difficult to be successful in the application of your knowledge in real problems. So we're still there. So just so you know. Next slide. But what we've layered on top, I think, is a really interesting and distinctive education that expands beyond just the technical training that one thinks of with a Cornell education. And what do I mean by that? So we have the Beauvais History and Ethics program. So ethics, right? How important is that for engineers to really have a deep understanding of their ethical responsibility to society? Leadership. How does one bring groups of people together, inspire them, and get them to move, in a consistent direction? The teamwork and management skills that Erica Dawson is now teaching. Communications, right? If you cannot communicate, I don't care how great your ideas are if you're not able to communicate them. We now have entrepreneurship programming, which in some sense continues to expand. The original program was the Kinzelberg program, but we now have the Kessler Fellows and other programming to enhance what we're able to do to inspire students to think about potentially starting new businesses. Learning initiatives is really about peer-to-peer education, how students can help each other and senior students with junior students and so forth. Project teams, which I'll say something about a little bit more, but as I said, a very distinctive feature of what we do. And I just wanted to mention the McCormick Teaching Excellence Institute. So Jim McCormick is a person who's very passionate about teaching and teaching well. Endowed this program, which has been phenomenally important to helping our faculty, particularly young faculty that come in, to become great teachers, not just okay teachers, but to really learn what do I need to be and do in order to really be able to teach at a high level. We're much more engaged in our teaching. It's much more active. It's not, the classroom is no longer a passive place where you just sit and quietly take notes. And how do you do that effectively? The McCormick Teaching Excellence Institute helps us. But beyond all of that, we went through something this spring in terms of moving our entire curriculum online. And I really can't say how much MTEI played a role in enabling all of our faculty to move, I think it was 178 courses that were residential one day, and then a couple weeks later had to be moved online in such a short period of time. And I'm incredibly grateful to that program for helping our faculty to be able to do that. Kathy Dimiduk, who's the director, just did an absolutely phenomenal job. Next slide. So I mentioned the project teams, and I said I'd come back to it, so here we are. So this is, as you know, project teams are where groups of students come together and work on really challenging design projects. So what are we talking about? It's a 9-month design, build, test, compete cycle if there is a competition, or maybe it's just you're doing something out there in the world. But getting things like that to happen, groups of people, you can see the size of what we call CU Air. So these are a couple of our autonomous vehicles. So we're talking about a plane that can fly itself, and an underwater vehicle, a submarine that can drive itself through water. So what are we saying? You're designing and building the mechanical systems. You're designing and building the electrical systems. You're designing and building the computer smarts behind it. All of that in a 9-month period. That's an extraordinarily difficult task. That we do this every single year. There's a whole new cycle, a whole new group of people that come together and do it. We do it very well. You'll see that we're recognized with lots of championships when we go about it. And I think this is where students learn a lot more than just the technical, although it is technically challenging. Let us not lose sight of that. This is a technically difficult thing to do, but you also get an understanding of of group dynamics. How do I get a group to work together? Of system design, because you can't, each group is doing separate systems that have to come together and work together. There's just a lot of there's financial issues that they have to manage. They learn really, in some ways, they operate like little companies, and so they learn a lot of skills that go beyond just the technical skills. Next slide. So we have different kinds of experiences. So there are also different types of teams. So there are also teams that are more sort of interested in a social outcome. So here's a couple, just engineers in action, who have built footbridges in the kingdom of East Swatini, or what was formerly Swaziland. So this is a case where they're designing and building something, and dealing with local governments and so forth in order to build and design to put the bridge in place. And so this is really again skills that go well beyond just the technical challenge. And then the last one here, this so-called debut, the biomedical team, that has developed this clip for intranasal drug delivery. So you're delivering the drug where it's needed. Again, it's looking at a sort of medical now, healthcare kind of advance, and again, all done by the students. So really, these are student-driven, immense amount of passion around it. Now, I have to say, this year we didn't quite get to the normal kind of outcomes of our year. Again, the pandemic really slowed down some of these things, and some of the designs never really became sort of built, unfortunately. But the hope is that maybe next year we can get back to sort of the full cycle that we would like to. Next slide. So collaborating. So, for those of you that have heard me speak about Cornell Engineering or Cornell University, frankly, in the past, you'll have heard me say that if I had to say one thing about Cornell that stands out, what is the one thing? This is the most collaborative place I know. It's just the way it is, the way I see it. So next slide. So you'll see here, particularly in the second bullet, that we've identified 4 areas of within the college of immense strength. So 2 of them, advanced materials. We have been a dominant force in advanced materials, literally from the 50s till now. We've had centers and so forth that have been operating. The CHESS facility, Cornell Center for Materials Research, and so forth. The complex systems, network science, and computation were really sort of an amazing group of sort of everything from sort of on the applied mathematics end of things to computation that we really are extremely strong. Think of it as the underpinnings of Cornell Tech and how and why we were successful with that. Bioengineering. So the last two areas are areas that I called areas of investment. Not that they're more important, but they were areas we were growing and developing. And so bioengineering, everything that engineering can do in the healthcare field and advancing what we can do in health is just tremendously important. I think engineering is really going to be, in some sense, over time, the sort of dominant contributing subdiscipline to healthcare. And so we've seen that grow. And then energy and the environment is obviously extraordinarily important and part of everything that we're trying to do across the campus in the area of sustainability. Next slide. So this is just a list of centers that came into being over the last 10 years. And I just identified the ones that are shown in bold are led by engineering faculty, but many of these centers really have tentacles that extend across the whole campus. This is our great strength. And not only this campus, but also in some cases in the medical areas that extend to the vet school and also extend to Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City. So it's really an exceptionally collaborative place. Next slide. And of course, there's Cornell Tech, right? So a few months into my term, former Mayor Bloomberg said, hey, I want to partner with a university. Cornell won that competition. This is the southern end of Roosevelt Island. And what you see on the right is Bloomberg Center. And on the left, the smaller building on the left is the Tata Innovation Center. And then the tall high-rise is the house, but is essentially where everyone lives. This has been an incredibly successful program. We're up to well in excess of 350 students on the campus, about 30-something faculty on the campus. We're only concluding, so this is the conclusion of phase 1 of 3 phases. So there are 2 more phases that are going to expand southward. We're looking south, that are going to expand into that green area that you see. And right now, phase 2 is under design. We're beginning to have the early discussions, but there will be that much more Cornell Tech built over, let's say, the next decade. And then phase 3 will be the final decade. So it's a 30-year horizon for the whole thing. So we're only a third of the way there. So keep tuned. It's going to just continue to be bigger and better and greater over time. Next slide. And then, so we are very focused on what I'll call the greater good, so I've captured a few of those activities. Next slide. So we are a leader in sustainability, and I mentioned that the energy work that we're doing within the campus, and so we one of the things I'm very proud of is what we call the living laboratory. Our campus is a laboratory, and we're looking to do something spectacular, which is to come off of using fossil fuels and to be so-called carbon neutral by 2035. So that's not that far away. And how do we want to do it? We have a little video to talk about that. So the next. So I'm not hearing anything, but I don't know if that's just me.
Five times deeper than the Marcellus. Geothermal energy is a clean, reliable, renewable source of energy that uses the naturally occurring heat in the Earth's crust. The heat can be used as hot water or steam to heat buildings or to generate electricity. Cornell scientists have studied large-scale geothermal systems around the world and are exploring ways to develop peak geothermal technology closer to home. Scientists will start by gathering data and studying rock formations beneath Cornell's Ithaca campus. Next, to reach the hottest rocks in our region, scientists would dig a 2 to 4 mile deep test well. That is more than 5 times deeper than the Marcellus Formation. The well will be safely enclosed with the highest quality pipes, casings, and other materials to protect the environment. Only after successful research, safety precautions, community engagement, and other approvals would scientists dig a second well to complete the system. This will allow water to be slowly pumped into the earth, where it would be naturally heated and pumped back to the surface and used to heat a small number of buildings on campus. While this is an exciting project, it will take years of careful research and planning to implement. If successful, it will heat our entire campus and create a new renewable energy industry capable of sustainably meeting heating challenges throughout New York State and beyond.
Great, thanks. So it's a very exciting project because I think in some ways it could initiate a new industry. There are a lot of opportunities, in particular in the upstate region, that have places that have energy distribution systems that would be amenable to having geothermal energy as a source of energy. So we're very excited. We have support that's come out of the DOE. We are approaching the state as well because we think it could be a great state industry, and so that will continue into the years to come. And I fully expect that we will be successful in becoming carbon neutral. So those of you that know me will have heard about this project as well. This is the so-called L train. So the L train is a subway in New York City that connects Brooklyn and Manhattan. It is sort of the northern side, part of Brooklyn, so it sits all by itself, and there's no other modes of transportation into Manhattan in the region. And the tunnel that goes through the under the East River was damaged during Hurricane Sandy and needed to be repaired. And the original plans were going to close that subway for 15 months, starting in April of 2019. And so a very shocking thing happened. And this is actually a true statement that I got a phone call ultimately from the governor, Governor Cuomo, on the phone saying, "This can't happen. Is there any way out of it? Can get me out of this situation if you can?" And so he called two of us. He called myself and he called Mary Boyce, who's the dean at Columbia. And so this was in December of 2018. He was seeing on the horizon April and the closure in 2019 of the subway, and was looking for our help. We spent all of that holiday, normal holiday break, working furiously and looking over plans, et cetera. And then we proposed something else, a different approach, in which there would be only closures on the weekends and at night. And during the day, there would be full service. And the approach, we just got rid of some of there was sort of wasteful removals and so forth that they were going to do. We got rid of it, and we were able to come up with a very different looking plan that we announced January 2019. And that's the lower right hand, that's me and Mary there next to the governor, where we're making that announcement to the press corps. Of course, they were not necessarily, you might think, oh, everyone's going to be patting you on the back. It's New York, so it's always a little tricky. So there was a mixed response. Some people were upset because they had been told that it was going to be closed. And these things have immense ripple because people move, businesses close. I mean, you can't imagine just one subway line, just such an important lifeline for a portion of the city. What I'm very proud to say, I got a phone call about a month ago that the project is now complete. so it not only did they had sort of scheduled that it would still take 15 months, but they completed it in 12 months. It went extremely well. And we embedded a lot more technology in the outcome. So there's actual monitoring that they can do of the tunnel in ways they never could before. And so it really came out, it couldn't be any better. And the MTA person who called me was just saying, boy, thank you, Cornell, and thank you, Columbia, for giving us a better outcome. I think it was $100 million less expensive. I mean, it just on so many levels, it really was a success. Next slide. And I'm just showing, I could go on and on about COVID research. I'm just showing as an example, faculty member in chemical and biomolecular engineering, Susan Daniel, who's been looking at how the COVID virus, the coronavirus, is able to replicate. It sort of injects its DNA into the cells and sort of co-opts cells to produce more virus. That's part of how it propagates. And so she's looking at ways to if you could stop that process, then you would have a therapeutic, basically. And so she's doing research, and that's collaborative with the vet school. Another example of the kind of collaborations that we do. Next slide. And this whole pandemic has really brought into the limelight our mathematicians. And I already mentioned earlier, we have some amazing mathematicians that are doing all kinds of things, and this is just a chunk of it. So I'm mentioning Peter Fraser, Associate Professor of Operations Research, who does a number of things. So he does epidemiology models that are being used. Quite honestly, we're using them to understand the fall, to figure out the best way to manage the fall, and to keep the propagation rates below, and so forth. This is another thing, is we're going to be doing surveillance testing, and it's expensive. But one way to make it less expensive is if you can test groups of people. So he's done work to understand, can we take multiple samples and test them at once? If the incidence rate is low enough, you can do that, and that you may clear 20 people in one test instead of having to do 20 sort of individual tests. And of course, if there's a positive, then that means you've got to do extra testing to kind of triangulate to the individual. But nevertheless, overall, there's a savings. And so he's, this is yet another example where he's contributing to our effort. Next one. So looking forward as we continue, right? And so next slide. So yes, there's a pandemic, right? And so back in mid-March, we sent all of our students home, which was a very painful step to take, but one we felt for the safety of the students that we had to do. Only essential research was allowed, and COVID-19 research, so we literally shut down all of our research operations. Basically, Cornell University looked like a ghost town. Like, you literally could, walk down the middle of all of the streets. There was just nothing happening. Amazing. Painful to watch, quite honestly. Really a hard thing to see. We reopened the curriculum I already mentioned 3 weeks later on April 6th, just after the spring break. We put all of our curriculum online across the whole campus, across the whole university. One of the things, I just wanted to bring to your attention is that just towards the end of early part of March, we had a presentation. I heard a presentation by the Dean Augustine Choi, who's the Dean of the Medical College, who was bracing. At that point, it had not quite happened, but was bracing for a big explosive infection in New York City. And he said things that I couldn't even fathom. He said, we're going to need 1 million N95 masks a month when this thing hits. And he was right. And we watched this happen. These folks are heroes. Like, I don't even know, it's almost hard for me to talk about, because it was extraordinary. And they knew it was coming. They did everything they could to get ready. They got the ventilators, they got the masks, and then it hit. And and as New York is still kind of recovering from that. But I can't say enough about people in the hospitals, the Columbia, the Weill Cornell Medicine, New York Presbyterian. They're in the front lines, and they did some absolutely amazing work in under very, very difficult circumstances. We did what we could. Activated a lot of our engineering. We did 3D printing to get visors to them because there were shortages. Cayuga Medical Center, our medical center, sent healthcare workers to New York. I mean, it really was the sense of mission and how can we help the city get through what was a really dark hour for them. Next slide. So our students completed, we completed the spring semester. One of the hardest things is our 2020 graduates really didn't get a traditional commencement because we can't gather. The president, Pollack, says that there'll be a commencement, in-person commencement at a future date. Not scheduled yet, but we hope to have it. We have every intention to have it, and I hope it can happen. So New York State is slowly reopening. So we're now in phase 2 of the reopening. Our research labs are open a little, so we're not fully open, but we're allowing so graduate students in small numbers can return to the research labs. And I'm working. There's a lot of committee work for the fall. We're trying to figure out a way to make the fall residential. So we'll stay tuned. Next slide. So I can't also give a presentation without saying a little bit about the social unrest in the country right now. As you all know, the horrible murder of George Floyd caught on video sort of exposed really bigger things, bigger problems in terms of the historical bias and racism that exists within the U.S. And that's touched off, protests and both good and bad. And so, sorry, go back. I didn't want to leave it. It's fine. Leave it there. And I just wanted to, to just sort of say that we had a town hall meeting yesterday with faculty and staff just to talk about it, just so that people could express themselves. It was with all of the leadership of the college. It's on everyone's mind. It's a painful day in some sense period for us. And but I always try to remain hopeful even in difficult times. And I remain inspired by our motto that Ezra Cornell said, at a time that was also a pretty difficult period right after the Civil War. That is, in some ways, a beacon in some sense, that we are about being a model to the nation. I always feel like that's Cornell's job. And so that's how I can sort of continue to move forward even under these difficult times. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to sort of walk through, I think it's a bright future for the college. Next. So I think that the college is going to continue to lead diversity. It's going to be the most diverse college and the greatest, college in the country. I jokingly say maybe the next team, like I got to announce gender parity, the next team maybe gets to announce that the percentage of URM in the campus is equal to the general population. Something you couldn't even have imagined years ago. Next. We're going to leverage Cornell Tech. As I said, we're only completing phase 1 of 3 phases. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to increase our influence across the world. Next. I think that the pandemic is going to change us. I think there's durable change that comes from moving all of higher ed, not just Cornell, online. We did it in a matter of weeks. And now that we've done it, I think we all are realizing there are advantages. to online. It's not all disadvantages. And so the question is, how do we capture those advantages somehow? I think it's disruptive to higher ed. And final bullet. So we inherited, post World War II buildings, and we're building a 21st century College of Engineering. Who knew those two things are not perfectly compatible? So we're going to need to continue to renovate our physical infrastructure to get it to be at the level to support the research and the education that we want to do for our students. Next. So I'm at the end. One more. Go Big Red. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Lance. So we've got about 13, 14 minutes for some questions. So we brought the panelists back as well. I'm going to go through the questions that were submitted through the Q&A. Somebody wants to know what the female percentage breakdown is by department. Is it balanced across departments or skewed more heavily toward one or two departments than others?
So I'm guessing that the question is directed at the undergraduate population. And so, no, it's not uniform. And so there are some disciplines historically had smaller numbers of women. And so let me give, sort of by way of example, and Mike can correct me if I get this wrong, I'm gonna guess electrical and computer engineering, maybe mechanical and aerospace engineering have somewhat smaller numbers of women, and then biomedical engineering and chemical and biomolecular engineering have somewhat higher numbers. So it isn't uniform, but all boats rise in a rising tide. So what you'll find is that our mechanical and aerospace engineering sits above the rest of the mechanical and aerospace engineering programs in the country. So, basically we all benefit because of the diversity of the college.
If I can just add to that we also are aware of those disparities and working hard to support and encourage development of especially women in some of the underrepresented majors.
So we had a question come in that says, it seems today we need more interdisciplinary talent, not just between different STEM disciplines, but between STEM disciplines and social sciences, humanities, et cetera. What is the College of Engineering doing to meet that challenge?
So that's a great question. And profound in ways, and it's hard to answer in just, So I mentioned about sustainability. I'll use that as maybe one of the frameworks. It's very easy to think about the technical challenges associated with sustainability. We're trying to do geothermal energy, so we want to drill a hole deep into the ground, take energy out of the earth. Okay, so that's got to do with drilling. That's got to do with how how do we manage the rock formations underneath in such a way to get the contact between the water. So there's all of these technical challenges. And of course, as an engineer, that's what you jump immediately into. But what you realize is that if you haven't done other things, like the public has to be comfortable with you doing it. And so, I hadn't thought about, that was not the first thing in my mind when I started on that project. And so you suddenly realize that part of what you're doing is communications. And what we did in the way, sort of along the lines you're describing, is that we have a communications department. Well, they're scholars of this, and they're using our project, and they're using surveys of people to see, well, what works and what doesn't work. What communication modalities and approaches are effective at getting the right information across to people, et cetera, and what is less effective? Should we have a big town hall meeting? Should we be doing things in small groups? Which ways work the best? And so there's actual scholarship that's happening in the communications department alongside with the technical developments that we're doing. This to me is Cornell at its best, because this is the nature of real life problems, is that they stretch across all of the dimensions of intellectual pursuit. And Cornell stretches over all the dimensions of intellectual pursuit. So it's really kind of bringing the best of what we have to offer.
Mike, did you want to add anything to that answer?
I might add that we talked about project teams, and we really look at those as addressing a lot of that interdisciplinary need. And it is a place where the students are drawing on it. These teams have to bring in business components, they bring in marketing. They draw from across the entire university. So the teams are not just engineers. They bring science, they bring social science. And that truly is where this interdisciplinary, they're learning what will be necessary as they move out into their careers in a living laboratory as well, which are the projects.
And it feels like this next question sort of flows out of that pretty well. Someone said that was a fascinating view of the engineering educational paradigm that's been developed. What challenges do you see need to be addressed by curriculum evolution in the next 10 years?
I'm going to turn that over. It could be more than one, but I'll start with Mike.
So I guess so one of I think the challenges in the paradigm is addressing resource elements. So a lot of those professional skills that we look at are very high touch. And one of the challenges we have is moving them to be embedded in the curriculum rather than looking as being add-ons to the curriculum. That ethics is not something you take a course in ethics, but rather that every course involves ethics. Every course involves communication. Every course involves development of teamwork and team leadership. And that is going to be a challenge. It's a paradigm shift for faculty that have traditionally looked at a course as fluid mechanics. I teach fluid mechanics, that we really need to merge them in. It will also involve a lot more blurring of the boundaries between departments and developing courses that are across those disciplines. I think the other thing that we see of students is that they no longer enter the workforce and stay within one major. And creating broad knowledge and capabilities to make those transitions during their careers is going to be a challenge moving forward for the next decade.
Grace, I don't know if was there anything you wanted to add about PhD? We don't often are not talking about our PhD students, but of course they are central to what we do. Do you have any thoughts about any trends that you see?
In terms of our PhD students, well, the trend is slightly different from undergraduate students because most of the PhD students, actually every PhD student is addressing a widely open problem. So by definition, those open problems are, I know that this is another element. We would like to gradually fold this into our undergraduate curriculum. As a matter of fact, we are seeing a lot of more open problems being folded into all the department, especially in the very beginning. All the design questions are more or less open, but now we can see more and more open problems are also appearing in our junior level courses, sophomore level courses. I think many of those designs are inspired by our PhD I would say research program and education of our PhD students, so that our faculty can readily take what they learn when they advise the PhD students and design much more effective experiences for our undergraduate students, as well as for master students. This is what I wanted to add.
So the only other thing I would add that I see in the trend line, and it's a little bit of the Cornell Tech, influence or gravitational pull, is entrepreneurship is really exploding, absolutely exploding. It's exploding at all levels. It's undergrads, it's Master of Engineering, it's PhD. We've been building programming at the PhD level, which I think is a little bit distinctive. So we are creating pathways for students with a PhD to think about a completely different career path than used to exist, where maybe they're going to take something out of their laboratory and try to turn it into a product and so forth. So we have commercialization fellows to help them get started. We're an I-Corps, NSF I-Corps node and so forth. So we're doing a lot on that front.
All right, and as you can imagine, there are several questions that revolve around COVID-19 and next semester. So somebody says, with a very, very low mortality rate among the young, does that come into play in our plans on how we then start back up? So I'm just going to leave that broadly. What can you tell us about the plans?
I think I'm going to take that one just because I've been really deeply involved in that planning exercise. Yes, it is thankfully, lower mortality, problems for younger people, but that does not mean that we want to just forget about, transmission, because there are vulnerable populations all the way through the age ranges. So what are we doing? We are designing our classrooms to have 6-foot separation so that the students are safely apart from each other. They're going to be wearing masks. When they are doing anything in a physical space where they're touching, using equipment or something, there will have to be sanitary protocol and regimen in place for them to be able to do that. We're looking at even how they walk to and from class, where maybe we're thinking about shutting down the streets so we widen the path so people can walk with greater space between them. You could start to say, well, what about all of their behavior outside of the classroom, and worry a lot about that. And of course we are, but we're thinking we're going to have a social contract with them, or maybe beyond social, to say that, well, if you're coming back, that you're going to sign on to a certain set of restrictions, at least for the time being, until we have a vaccine or something to really protect the population. We also worry a lot about transmission between the students and more vulnerable populations, and I'm pointing to me because it's like the faculty or like us, which is also a concern. So we're looking at how do we protect our faculty, et cetera. So it's a complicated thing, but we're working to be residential this fall. I hope we can pull it off, because that's what a university is. It's really not intended to be kind of a fully online. And so we're working very hard. Ultimately, it is a call that the president and the provost makes. It's not our decision, but we're putting the plans in front of them to try to make it happen.
All right, thank you. So somehow we have found ourselves with just 2 minutes left, and there are still many unanswered questions. So the one I'm going to ask you, at some point you're going to be writing a letter to your successor, I'm sure, and hiding it in their desk. Somebody would like to know, what is the biggest priority for the new dean?
Right. That's a president there thinking about that letter. The famous letter that a president leaves in the desk for the next president. I do believe that there's, as always, there are two things that a dean has to worry about, and I started by talking about faculty because that really is the engine for the college. So the continued hiring of faculty is going to be sort of first order of business. And then the second thing is that I think we must continue the renovations we've started, but we're in a situation where the facilities that we have cannot support the kinds of things that we need to do, that we want to do. We're nano everywhere. We're bio everywhere. These are no longer specialized things that happen in one little corner of the college. They're very pervasive, which is wonderful, right? So isn't that amazing? But because of that, we have to respond to that. I do think those are two really big priorities for the person. I'll be sure to, now that we've shared it, I'll write a very private note to the next dean. So I'm going to take another 30 seconds and just say it has been an honor and a pleasure beyond belief to serve as the leader of this college. This is just the best place to be. Like I have enjoyed every minute of the job. I am very proud of the faculty we have. I'm very proud of the students we attract, and I'm very proud of the alumni base. You all made my life fantastic. And I just, I wish we were all in a room together so it would feel more like a celebration. But understand that I celebrate you all of the time. I talk about how wonderful our alumni are. And I hope that we will cross paths at some future point. Some of you may know I'm actually going to be moving on. I'm going to be leaving Cornell and taking on a job as the executive director and vice president at Virginia Tech's Innovation Campus in Northern Virginia in Alexandria. And that starts August 1st for me. So it's just a few weeks from now, I'm going to be leaving Cornell. It's a hard thing for me to do because I have nothing but love for this place. This has just been a fantastic run. So this is it for me, folks, as far as reunions is concerned, but you know where I live. You can always find me, and happy to talk with any of you. Thank you for your support over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the reunion and the reunion events. And if you asked a question but didn't get it answered, you can submit by email to the communications department, and we will direct it to the person who can most, get you the best answer. Okay. Thank you all again very much. That's the end.
Go Big Red.